Welcome guys, in this last part of my tank series we're creating all the scenes. We are creating the game manager and we are kind of tying everything together to make it a complete game. So as always, the full project is available on Patreon for download. I will also upload this on SideQuest so you can play it right away. Check the description for the links. Like and subscribe and have fun guys. So we're gonna add the capability for the projectile to hurt the player. So find the projectile in your prefab folder and open up the hit detector script, and below these lines of code in the collision enter method we want to check if the collision .game object .transform .root .compare tag is player. If this is true, we are hitting the player. So then we want to send a message to the player. We can just copy this. And root, I don't know if I explained this earlier, but that means the parent. So if we hit maybe the tracks, this will always be the topmost object, the parent in the hierarchy. Meaning it will be this. We might hit this part, but the root is always here. So that's why we do root. Dot send message. Call it hit. So when we get here, we will get the tank controller script, which is applied to the player tank right here. So if we just add a method called hit in here, and make it public, this method is called whenever the player gets hit. So let's test it out. And that works great. And we can leave the player like this for now. Later, we just added the game over functionality right here. Right now, let's make sure we can kill the enemy. So open up the hit detector script again. So for now we just do this. We check, is it the enemy we're hitting? If so, just destroy it. Remove it from the scene. Then we also need to add the tag to the enemy. So open up the prefab or select the prefab. Create a new tag. Enemy. Select the enemy prefab again and apply the tag. And now if you have changed the input, change it to keyboard input again. And play to test if we can kill the enemy. that works great. So instead of just removing the enemy, we want the enemy to start smoking or burning or something to simulate that he is dead. So open up the hit detector script and just copy this line of code and put it right here instead. Now you can even go to the tank controller and copy the hit method and put it in the enemy AI instead. I'm gonna put it right here, and then I'm gonna move all of these below the update function. I like to have the start and the update at the top and then my own methods. So right in here we want to create, let's say, enemy dead equals true. So we need to create that boolean. Just like that. And we will turn that boolean to true when the enemy is hit. So now we want to find some kind of fire that we want to be put inside the enemy and be activated when the enemy is dead. So open up the enemy prefab, lock it, and then go to your assets folder and find the simple FX effects that we downloaded in the first part of this series. So let's try smoke. We can try it in here first so we can see the effect. Do we want it to smoke, or maybe we want it to be on fire? Maybe both. Yeah, both might be cool. Let's try that. Delete them from the scene. Open up the enemy prefab again. Lock it. Now, this is the fire. Now this is the smoke, sorry. Pull that up a bit. Bring in the fire. Just like that. And now see, if we press play, that looks kind of cool. When you should bring the smoke down a little bit. But other than that, I kind of like that. And now deactivate both of them. And open up the enemy AI script. Create 2 new game objects. Smoke and fire. And put some right here. We keep doing as I have done. So if enemy dead equals true, or as I told you before, this will be the same thing. If enemy dead is true, this will be if enemy dead is false. So sometimes I leave it like this because I forget that I'm doing a beginner tutorial. If you wonder about that, I'm gonna try to keep to doing this. If enemy dead equals true, then smoke dot set active to true and fire dot set active to true. And we can also, in this update function, we can first extract this to its own method. Extract smoke and fire. And here another if statement. If enemy equals false. So if the enemy is alive, then we want to move the enemy, search and all that stuff. Else, meaning if enemy dead is not false, it gotta be true, so the enemy is dead, then we want smoke and fire. So let's try this out. Back in the prefab, we gotta populate the smoke and fire with the smoke and fire. So smoke to the smoke slot, fire to the fire slot, and now press play and try to kill the enemy. Nice, that works. There's one little bug, but that's nice. So back in the enemy AI script, we have this little bug. Because we're doing this, invoke fire cannon in 2 seconds. So even if the tank is dead, this will fire in 2 seconds. So let's just find the fire cannon script and add and enemy dead equals false. So now he cannot fire if he's dead, even though we call it here. It will stop because this will be false, so this will not happen. It will not fire. So it's time to create the game manager. And the game manager will be the script that holds the logic for the game. It will keep track of alive enemies and yeah, whatever we want it to keep track of, really. So create an empty game object. Rename it game manager, and on here we add another component, a new script, call it game manager, create an add. You can make sure you drag it into the scripts folder. You see it get another icon. It will still work like a normal script, but it's kind of a special script because we only have one of these in each scene, and it's the lord of the game, basically. It keeps track of everything. So double click to open the script. So we're gonna start with the function of figuring out how many enemies are still alive in this scene. So we start with a public int enemies in scene. So this number will have to be set in the editor, and we have a function, call it void enemy dead, and this needs to be public because we're gonna call it from the enemy. And then we do enemies in scene minus equals, oh, just do minus minus. This will decrease this number by 1. Same thing if we would do plus plus, we would we would increase enemies in scene by 1, but we want to decrease the number. And let's add another function. Can do this here. If enemies in scene equals 0, debug.log next scene. Okay, so now we will need an instance of the game manager inside the enemy. So make a public game manager, and in the start function we want to populate the game manager variable with the game manager object. So we're gonna use this handy function. It's a static method, it's called game object dot find game object with tab. Make sure you do not have find game objects with tab. That will try to find several and it will return an array, so that will not work. We need game object with tag, and we want to tag game manager So to make this a little bit more clear, I will do this war game manager game object, because this will return the game manager game object, and inside the game manager game object we want to get component the game manager, just like that. And now at the start function we will populate the game manager with the actual game manager. Now, one very important performance point about this, you want to use this method as little as possible. It is not fast. It's not at all fast, really. But if we use it in the start function and only like this sparingly once, we will get a performance spike, but it will happen in the beginning of the game before you even play anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But be very careful by using this. Now back in Unity, we need to apply the tag game manager to the game manager object. So create game manager. Remember it's case sensitive, so you gotta spell it the exact same way as you did in the script. Select it and apply the tag. And we also want to set enemies in scene to 1 and try to kill him. We should get the debug message. Next scene. Oh, we are not calling him yet. We need to go to the enemy AI script. We need to go when the enemy dies. So when enemy is hit, right here, we want to go game manager dot enemy dead. Now we call this method inside the game manager, and we decrease enemies in scene by 1. So let's try this again. Okay, so it's not working. I'm not sure why. I'm gonna try to figure it out. I missed. Oh, simple beginner mistake, guys. You see this little star? I forgot to save the script. Control S. Try it again. And you see, now it works. So now we're just gonna make sure that we cannot decrease the enemy count by hitting the same dead enemy again. Because right now that will work. We can shoot the enemy 5 times, although he's dead, and we will keep decreasing this number. So in the enemy AI, in the hit method, if enemy dead equals false, is false, then we want to do this. Otherwise we don't want to do anything. And now that bug is gone. So I think it's time to start building the levels. I probably forget something, definitely in the game manager, that I will add as we go along, but let's start making the levels. So head over to the asset store and find some kind of low poly terrain. Sort by low to get the free ones. Okay, I'm gonna start with the desert. Maybe we can make a few desert levels. Download and import. And you can see it's very small. It's 570 kilobytes, so it's very low poly and great for our purposes. Back in the editor, we can remove this beautiful plane we have here. Just delete it. Go to the project folder, to newly downloaded assets, Unity prefabs, start with the terrain, and choose one of these. It doesn't really matter too much. And just position it at the 0 values. Like that. And make it bigger, maybe 50 by 50 to start with. That's big enough. So as you can see, the ground is all flat right now. If we up the Y value, we will get this hilly terrain. But remember, the enemy right now is not searching up and down. He's only searching circular around himself at the same height. So right now we're gonna stick to flat ground. Later, in the later levels, we can start mixing, experimenting with hilly ground. But right now, let's keep it flat. Create an, in your prefabs folder, create a new folder and name it environment, because here we will store all the prefabs that we will use for the styling. So in our newly downloaded desert pack, you can find something like rocks. You can bring a rock in, turn down the light, the shadows and all the lightning. And as I said before, when the game is done and we know it works well, then we can start adding shadows and stuff until we kind of hit the max limit of what your headset can take. So here we have a rock. We want to make it a prefab in the prefabs folder we created. So open up the environment, drag it in here. I have already a few items in here. I can delete them because that's from an experiment. So drag the rock inside here, open it up, press F to focus if you don't want to scroll, and now we want to add some colliders here. So start with one box collider, but you see it's on the outside. It's not good, so make it smaller. Oops. Oh, I want to move it along the sea. Something like that. Make it wider. And that's not great. So make it smaller. Maybe like that. And then we add another collider down here. So another box collider. And this is called composite colliders. We use several box colliders to fit our objects, because it's a lot nicer to our hardware if we do this instead of using mesh colliders, because mesh colliders, as I said before, are very costly. So maybe like that, and then maybe one collider to cover this area, so another box collider. And you can spend more time on this and make it a lot nicer if you like, but it's not very necessary for this tutorial. I just want to make sure you understand what we're doing. Oh, there we go. So something like this. Now we have colliders and we can collide in all these different areas. Back to the scene. Now we want to make that rock bigger. It's very small. I want big rocks, so open up the prefab, make it maybe 10 by 10. And that's a bigger rock. Nice. Now we can just start placing these rocks around, and keep doing the same with you can add some plants like these. They do not need a collider, they are only for show. So put some of those around, make sure make a prefab of them. And when you put in bigger things like a tree, let's say, first of all, always make prefab of your stuff. Open it up, add a box collider to the tree, because we want to be able to collide with the tree. And we do not want it to be this big, we only want the trunk. This is the only part we need to collide with. So make it smaller. We do not need the height really. And put it like that. And that's good enough. If you want to be able to collide and shoot the top of the tree, you add another collider. But just place it something like that, and we're good. Now all the trees we add will have this collider. I'm gonna move it a little bit more, like that. And then when you place more trees, you drag from your prefab folder. And I will do this now. I will style the map and I will be right back. And as you can see, it kind of builds up with a lot of objects in here. So create an empty game object. Name it environment. And drag in all your environment prefabs in here to kind of clean it up a little bit. We can even keep the ground in here, just like that, and keep on styling. So I'm done with my styling for now. If you select the ground, you see we still have a mesh collider here, and that's process heavy, so remove the mesh collider, just add a box collider instead. Next, if you hit the game tab right here, you can see that it all falls off and we see the end of the world like this. We do not want that. Instead, we want to copy the plane, drag it out, and put some rotation to it, maybe 17 on the C. Move it into place, like that. We can even make this part a little bit hilly to make it simulate that it goes off in the distance. You can make it longer along the C, yeah, like that, 100. Then remove the box collider from this new hilly part. Select it, Control D to copy, put the rotation back to 0, move it to the other side, rotation back to opposite, minus 17. Just like that. Now copy this part, rotation to 0, rotate it 90 degrees along the Y, drag it into place, rotation to 17 again, minus 17 if you're on this side, drag it into place. Like that, copy it, rotation to 17, and just like that. Check out the game tab, and that's a lot better. Maybe we should move this around. Anyway, I like it, it looks a lot better. We can make them a little bit bigger right now. So, oh, not on the Y, obviously, on the X, and maybe 150 here. Yeah, we'll try that for now. 75 and 150, and that's better. Awesome. Now we need some colliders so that the player will not drive. He can still drive straight through this and drive off the end of the map. So in the environment, create a new empty game object. Call it just collider. It's good enough. And to it, add a box collider. And there is our box collider. So select the collider, drag it up, put it at the end, and make it a whole lot bigger. Press F to focus, and you don't have to do that. Maybe that big. I want to drag it up though. And place it where we do not want the player to pass through. So right here. Make it taller and a lot longer on the X, maybe 100. A lot more, so 500, 500, and drag it over here, and that's good. And now the player cannot drive through there, so Control D, drag it to the other side. Control D, spin it 90 degrees along the Y. Control D again. And there we go. Now the player will not be able to drive outside of the map. So let's populate the scene with some enemies. Select the first enemy that we already have here. And we want to make sure that we have patrol positions for every enemy. So I'm going to rename this enemy to enemy 1. Oops. Rename enemy 1. And patrol positions enemy 1. I'm going to place these positions properly. So I want one over here. I want the second one over here. And the player starts over here. So add another enemy to the scene. Name him enemy 2. Copy the patrol positions object. Call it patrol positions enemy 2. And now move them to wherever you want this new enemy to patrol. What happened? And there we go. I'm gonna build and run to test this, and that works good. It's still very smooth and there's no problem really. What we need to do though is the enemy 2 is not driving because we have not added the patrol positions to the enemy. So first and second, and now that will work. So we can populate with yet another enemy. So let's figure out, there player starts. We've got one enemy here. We got one enemy there. So maybe put another enemy over here somewhere. Create new patrol positions. Okay, let's test it out. But first, of course, add the patrol positions to the new enemy. First and second. And I'm starting to test now inside the headset every time, so I can see if it's too much stuff or too many enemies or whatever for the Oculus Quest. So I'm gonna build and run out to my quest. Control B. So that's a video from my quest, and there was one obvious bug, and that's because I have put some of these patrol positions at different heights. You see these are 76 and 77. Should keep everybody at 76 and that should be good now. Also, I'm not sure if we should consider it a bug or not, but the enemies can kill each other. Maybe that's fair. We can easily make that not happen, but I'm gonna leave it like that for now. We'll see if it's an issue later, then we deal with it. But it's quite fun. I mean, now we need some... we need to tell the game manager how many tanks are in this scene, and there will be 3. Enemy tanks, that is. Then we want to have different behavior when all the enemies are dead. So open up the game manager. And now we're just saying next scene. Just to test, we're gonna do scene manager. Oh, sorry, it's Unity engine. Dot scene manager. Scene management. Dot scene manager. Dot load scene. And we're just gonna reload the first scene once we have killed all the enemies. And now we're gonna try this. I'm gonna change the controllers back to keyboard, so I don't have to build for this one. And now play and test to see what happens when we kill all the enemies. And you see the second scene, the first scene is reloaded right away. And that's awesome. Now all we have to do to load the next scene, we create another scene and then we do this. And then we will load the second scene in the build order. So let's create the second scene. So in your assets folder, go to your scenes folder. We can rename the sample scene to let's do War 1 or Map 1, because maybe we want to add another scene before Map 1 that we're gonna call like the UI, the absolute start scene before the game starts. So call this Map 1, hit reload, and now we have everything in Map 1. So add another scene by hitting File, New Scene, can rename it, or sorry, Control S to save it in your scenes folder, call it Map 2, save. And now we have both the scenes in our scenes folder, and we can click them to go between them. We also have to add it to the build order in the build settings. So here we got map 1. Find the second scene, open it, add it. Now we have both the scenes in the scene build, and this is the build order. You see the 0, that's the first scene, 1, that's the second scene. So now if we go back to the first scene, we go to the game manager, open up the script, and we change this. This was a 0, change it to a 1. Now when all the enemies are dead, or when the game manager thinks that there's no enemies left, hitting a 0 here, and the second scene is loaded. But before we move on to the next scene, I want to make some changes to the enemy first of all, because the enemy do not have any sound. It has no motor sound, no turn tower sound, no cannon sound, no anything. So I'm gonna add those things. I'm gonna add 3 audio sources. I should really open up the prefab to make sure I'm making the changes in the prefab and not to any enemy in the scene. And it is what I'm doing, but just to make sure, open up the prefab. And again, audio source. And open up the enemy AI script. We can just copy this from the time controller, that will be quicker. Just like that. Back in the Unity editor, or actually stay in the script. We also need to play the sound. When the enemy shoots, right here, we want to play cannon source. What did I call it? Oh, it is cannon source. Dot play one shot of the cannon sound. And then we have the barrel source, and we do not need the barrel source because the enemy is not moving the barrel. So you can remove that and remove the barrel sound too. And then turn tower source. And we can copy the way we did it inside here. When the barrel is moved, we're gonna check that. So when the tower is turned, turn tower towards the player. This should be turn tower source, of course. And this should be the turn tower sound. Let's keep it like this for now. We might have to make it a little bit nicer, but we test this out. This might be good enough. Oh, I never added the sounds to the enemy. So you see right here, we need to add the tower source, the cannon source, then we can remove the last source because we do not need it. And we do not need to do that. So tower sound and cannon sound in the sounds folder. You can lock this cannon fire and the turn tower. Now play and test. So we hear them, but we hear them way too much. We forgot to do the spatial blend all the way to 3D. Spatial blend to 3D, try again. So that's good. Now the enemy has sound and we can hear him, but the spatial blend all the way to 3D like this will make it so that we can only hear the enemy when we are very close to him. But we want to know when the enemy is turning his tower, because if the enemy is turning his tower, he got us targeted, and we want to know that. The player want to know it. So I'm going to experiment a little bit with the blend to find a value that's better suited for the game, and I will test and I will be back. So after some experimentation, I found that a spatial blend of 0.93 on the turn tower, a spatial blend of 93 on the cannon fire, and about 45 on the volume of the cannon fire gives good results. But we have another bug. Somehow the enemy tower is not completely flat. He's aiming up a little bit, and that makes him to miss us when we are at a distance. So we gotta fix that. So to fix this, find the turn tower and D parent or D child, everything inside of it. Now move this up to be in line with the barrel. This is moving the empty turn tower game object. And then drag these back inside again, and let's test. So as you could see, he is aiming a little bit to the left of us when it's a great distance. So to fix this, we need to figure out why that's happening. We got the turn tower right here, and it is in line with the barrel. We have the barrel exit, looks to be in line. Maybe the barrel is not in the exact middle of the tower. Let's try to move that a little bit. Test again. And we still have the same bug. Open up the enemy. Let's rotate the cylinder just a tiny bit to the right. So we need to do that on this object and rotate it along the y-axis. Oh, you see, this is why I have done this. Maybe you have not. There we go. It was half a degree off. Now it should work. Excellent. So I'm gonna copy and move this rock just so that I'm not in the sight of one of the enemy tanks as the game starts. We have this tank over here, but it got trees in the way, so it will shoot, but the trees will stop the bullet. I'm gonna move this down a little bit because it's flying. And just like that. I'm gonna do the same for some of my rocks. They are in the air. I still get some weird behavior. When the tanks reach their end position. And that's because I made the enemy AI turn around part of the script too sensitive. Open up the enemy AI script and do here. We're checking he needs to be within 1 meter of the start or second position patrol location. Let's change this to like a 5 instead, and they will turn easier. Also, if you see your tanks are dipping down like that, it's because your patrol positions are too low. So in my case, this 76, it's too low. This number will be different for you depending on what height you put everything in. But I'm gonna do this at maybe 78 instead. Nice. So there's obviously so much more stuff you could do and add and modify, but I'm gonna try to keep this tutorial not too long. So I'm gonna be happy with the first level right here. I'm gonna start working with the second level, and to do that, just find your scenes folder and double click on map 2. Nice. So there's obviously so much more stuff you could do and add and modify, but I'm gonna try to keep this tutorial not too long. So I'm gonna be happy with the first level right here. I'm gonna start working with the second level, and to do that, just find your scenes folder and double click on map 2. But instead of recreating the whole map again, I'm gonna make it a little bit easier. So I'm gonna go back to scene 1, and we're gonna drag the whole environment into our environment prefabs folder. You see I already done this here, but you just drag this in, and now you have a prefab of the environment. Go back to scene 2, and drag in the environment. You can zero out the position values just like that, and we have something to work with. Now we can modify this and style it differently to make it feel like a new map. So now I kind of want to change the styling. I do not want the rocks and the cactuses and stuff. I want something else. So I'm gonna go to the asset store, search for low poly, and find something I like. Sort by low so we get the free ones. And I'm gonna look through here. So I decided on this one, low poly seasonal landscape. Download and import. Then I'm gonna clean out the environment folder, making sure I do not delete the ground. We gotta unpack the prefab, of course. Else we change it in the scene 1 as well, and we do not want to do that. Then we want to change the color of the ground. I do not want this to be desert. So and these are inside the very same pack. It's models ground, no. It was not textures. I had it a second ago. Oh, there we go. I use these materials. So now it's time to style this map too. I'm gonna do that using the prefabs that came with this pack. So I'm just gonna follow the exact same pattern as I did in the last tutorial. I'm turning off the shadows. And I'm adding a collider. I'm resizing the collider. And I'm adding it to my environment prefabs. And just like that, I'm gonna keep doing the same thing. I'm gonna pause because this will be boring. And I'm happy with that. So let's bring in the player. Put him right there. And let's start bringing in some enemies. I want one on the far side here. Gonna call him enemy 1. And then we need to create the patrol positions for enemy 1. Just like that. And I'm gonna place them right there. Make sure they're at a good height. They are not. So bring them down. Forgot to add them to the tank as usual. First and second. Oh, we need to bring in the game manager as well. And I have not created a prefab of this yet, so we need to go back to the first map, open the prefabs folder and drag in the game manager. Now back to your second scene. You need to keep the game manager right here. So that seems to be working. Seems to be some kind of bug with the... Put it here. I think he's hitting the collider before he's hitting the turning point, the patrol position. Yep, now it's working. So let's bring in a few more enemies. Copy this one. Move him to maybe here. Rename. To keep track of them easier. Copy the patrol positions. And move them. I want this enemy to be traveling in this direction instead. And add them. Great, we actually can turn off the debug.draw ray. Oh. Debug. I'm just Control F and searching in the document for debug, and I'm just gonna comment this out. I'm gonna leave it because I might want it just like that, and that searching ray will not longer draw. And now when I play this, I see that I forgot to remove the main camera. This means that you have at least two main cameras, so this will be the main camera, the OVR camera rig, and whatever. We need to remove the main camera. And we see the enemy driving here. He should detect the player in this open pass, open field towards the player. Stop. Oh yes. So that works. Now if we move the player behind the mountain again, he should stop shooting. He does not stop shooting, and that's a tiny little bug. We'll fix it right away. Open up the enemy AI script, and in here find the turn search ray function. Here we're checking if we're hitting something, and if that something is the player, then hitting player is true. But if we're hitting something, which will be the mountain or the environment, and it's not the player, then we also have to set hitting player, god damn it, hitting player to false. We never get here because we're still hitting something. So if we add this, now he should stop shooting when we hide behind the mountain. And he does. Awesome. So I want to make a tiny adjustment to the game manager so that we can easier to load the next scene. Let's make a public int scene to load on win. And right here, instead of the number 1, we set scene to load on win. So inside the game manager in your scene, you will have to set this. This is level 2, aka 1 in the build order. 0 is the first one, 1 is the second. So when we win the second level, we want to load scene number 2, number 3. 0, 1, 2 is number 3, but yeah, I hope you understand that I made that complicated. It's not complicated. You can check here. Build settings. Scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. So number 2. And we also gotta go to the first scene again. Save. And we gotta adjust this to number 1. We also want to create a prefab of the motor sound so that we can add that to the second scene. And maybe something else. We can make oh no, whatever. That's good for now. Back to scene 2. And add the motor sound. Motor sound, and there we go. Make sure it's all good. I have found that the search ray sometimes has issues finding the player. And my guess would be that it's too far up, or maybe on an angle. So I'm gonna move it down. Oh, not like that anyway. I'm gonna move it down like this and test again and see if I do not have that issue anymore. You hear that? They find me right away now. I start shooting both here and here. Awesome, that made it a lot better. So now I have a new issue. They can see me right where I start, and that's my level design. So I'm gonna move some rocks and stuff around to make that not so instant dangerous. Just like that. And I kind of want this second level to be a night fight. So I'm gonna find a light box. Night sky. Sort by low to get the free ones. And I usually use this Urban Night Sky by Kendall Weaver. It's great. So I'm gonna use that one. And it's very small. So it's great for our little quest. And I just said light box. It's skybox, obviously. Skybox. So find it. Urban Night. Demo, materials. Oh, and find the light tab. If you do not have it up here, you go window, rendering, lightning settings. And then you drag this into the skybox. And look at this. Okay, so I'm gonna add a few more enemies to this second scene. Then I'm gonna add a third scene, and that's going to be like an in-between scene. So that it's not so instant that we go from one scene to the next. We get something in between instead. But first, adding some enemies here. I'm gonna pause because you know the drill. Copy an enemy, copy patrol positions, and place him. Nothing more. So there we go. I added 2 more enemies to my scene. I do not know what the max number is before we get lag, but 4 seems to be okay. You might be able to do a few more without any issues. Just keep a track of the profiler and test in your headset. It all depends on your level design and a few other things. So, you know, test, see how many you can fit before it starts lagging. But I found 4 to be challenging enough to play. The enemy is kind of good at hitting me. So I found 4 to be good. Let's start to create the third scene, the in-between scene. So again, file, new scene. Control S to save it. Save it in your scenes folder. I'm gonna do the intro scene, the startup scene. So let's call it intro, or that's a bad name. Do start. Remove the main camera. And while looking for some low poly military things to add to our intro scene, I found Soldier Voice Military Radio. It's a free asset and it has a bunch of cool sounds, so we might want to add something to our game before we do the intro scene. So select the Game Manager prefab and open up the Game Manager. Add. And these names are obviously not the best, but I'm only doing this to test right now. So we need to add an audio source to the Game Manager. And drag it to the audio source slot. Now find the voices. We need to lock the Game Manager. And then find the voices. I want enemy down. There we go. Let's try to kill an enemy. Oh, let's go to a scene that's actually working and kill an enemy. And that added some nice spice to the game, I think. I'm gonna keep that. And now I'm gonna start working on the new scene, the intro scene. And in here, let's add a plane. Zero out the position values. Okay, so I wonder what we should use. We can bring in the OVR camera rig. And maybe we can bring in a tank. So just a player tank, but clean it out. We do not want this tank to move or be functional. We also want to remove the OVR camera rig from inside the turn tower. Oops, you do not want to do that like I just tried to do. You want to unpack it and then remove the extra camera rig. You can set this camera to floor level. Then let's add some text. So right click, 3D object, text mesh pro, import TMP essentials. I'm gonna bring in the night sky from that we downloaded before, Lightning tab. Call this one VR tanks. Copy it. I'm just gonna do a simple countdown. Oh, I'm in the Lightning tab. Back to the inspector. Make it smaller, smaller font. Now bring in the game manager, prefab folder, game manager, maybe even the motor sound, why not? And here, scene to load on win will be 1, because we will change the build order and put this one at the top, and then 1, then 2. So open up the game. We can actually, create a new script. Load next. Let's call it load game. Double click to open it. Oops. Public game manager. Game manager. And in the start function we can do find component with tag. Remember, no S, not components. There we go. Oh, and then we'll have to do this. Get component game manager. And remember before I separated these two statements. So first I got the game object and then I populated the game manager. We can do it at once instead, just like this. Save some code. It will be the same thing as I did in here. It's separated. First I get the game object and then we take the game object and do the get component. Instead we're just doing it at once. It will be the exact same thing. And that's my dog trying to dig into the couch, if you hear that. We also want to create a public text mesh pro. Call it text. And you get this, so select it, Alt Enter, using TMP Pro, or you can just add this manually. Create another public int, call it countdown, set it to maybe 10 seconds. And in the update function, take text.text equals game starts in plus countdown minus time sense level load. We need to put these inside parentheses and do toString, because it's an integer now and this will only take strings. So we make a string of this number. Now back in the Unity editor, we put the script on the game manager. So we want to populate the game manager with the game manager and the text with the countdown. If we press play now, this should be counting down. And it does. But the text is too big since the countdown happened below here. So I'm gonna start with just making this font smaller on the Text Mesh Pro. I'm gonna simulate this first and then maybe make it a 15. Try this. But do we really need all the decimals? I don't feel like we do. We can use this function. Let's do math.round. And we do not have math, so Alt Enter, we need system, using system. And now it should get rounded down to a full integer. Awesome, so then we can make the text bigger again. Nice. And now open up the game manager prefab, the actual script, and add another function. Load next level, and if we call this function, we want to do this as well. And instead of doing this up here, we can just call that function. Now back in the load game, if this expression equals 0, we can even do equals or is less than 0. This goes on the other side. then game manager dot load next level. And we obviously have to tell the game manager inside our scene here what level to load. Yeah, we already did that. So it will load the next level. And now we need to go to our other scenes and change the game manager load to 1 above. Oh, I need to select the start scene and press play and see if it works. And it does. So I'm only gonna do some modifications here. Nothing major. Just say first. I can actually do this in the load script. Let's add a public string, call it load text. Change this to that. And inside here, instead, we type in the text, then we can reuse this object easier. So first level loading in. I'm gonna change the size again. And this is the sample text. This doesn't really matter. I'm only using it so it's easier for me to find the right size. Good. So I'm gonna bring this down again. I think it's too far up. Let's try that. And now I want to copy this scene. I want to have a very similar scene in between every level, just some different text. So go to your scenes folder, select the start, Ctrl D, copy it, rename it. And let's do 1, 2, 1 and 2 in between. It's not a great name, but it's a name. Open it up and change the text. And then we need to change this. So 0 is the start. 1 is the first map, 2 will be this, so we want to load 3, and we have to change all these ones again. So this one is right, I guess. Yep. And this one we will load 3, yes, and this one we will load 4. So I just tested the game, and there's a small bug in the game manager. We do not want to load the next scene right away when all the enemies are dead. We want to give it maybe 1 or 2 seconds so it's not so instant and the enemy down sound has time to play. So open up the game manager, create a timer. You know this by now. It's a private float next level timer maybe equals 2 private float next level equals 0. Can remove the start function. If next level is less than time.time, then we want to do this. And any time an enemy dies, we want to set the next level equals time.time plus next level timer. And there we go. Last of all now, we need to make sure that the enemy can kill us. Because right now we are invincible. And that's not good. So open up the tank controller script. And we want to create an instance. We want to get an instance of the game manager. I want to do the same way as we do in the other script, so I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to do it this way then. And if the player is hit, the player will die. So I guess we should create a new level. A new method, sorry. Player dead. And this does not exist in the game manager just. So go to the game manager and create a public void player dead. Now in here, I say we want to play some kind of sound. Rename this sound to enemy down. And in here we can play, we can use the same source because they will not play at the same time anyway. Now we're gonna find a sound in the sound pack that we downloaded. And looking through the sounds, I kind of like this one, I'm down. So I'm gonna try that. Select the game manager, lock it. And we need to add the sound, of course. And add it to the play one shot in the player dead, like that. Now back in Unity, since I renamed enemy down, I have to add that again. I'm down and enemy down. Where is it? There we go. Back in the game manager, we need to set scene to load on loss. And right here, I'm gonna do one of these. But we're also gonna need a timer. We need to wait for this sound to finish playing. So I'm gonna do what I think is the easiest, and it will be this: public void reload level. I'm gonna put this in here. I'm gonna do invoke this one after maybe 1 second, and just like that, let's try it out. So first we need to set the load on what level to load in each scene. So in the first one, load on loss. I just want to reload. I can reload the first one here. Oh, let's just reload the scene. Sorry. And on 2, save. And in here, it will be load number 3 on loss, which is reloading the same level, because I have added another in between. So first we have start, then we have the first level, then we have in between, then we have the second level, and then we have the third in between. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Great, now I will build out and test. Okay, so I've tested this and it works great. I would make some minor modifications to the player tank. It's hard to finally adjust when we're shooting at a long range, so I would say turn speed maybe to 20, and the barrel, oops, to even slower, maybe a third of the turn speed. That will be better. And that is pretty much it, guys. From here I will only maybe add a few more sounds. I will style and make a few more levels, but I will keep doing the same thing as we have done the whole time. So there's nothing new. I will just make it a bigger game, and everything that I have done will be available on Patreon for download. And I'm also gonna try to get this up to the side quest so you can play it there. So if you watch all the video, all of the tutorials so far, good job. That's like 5 hours, so awesome. Thank you for watching, and like and subscribe if you don't already do it.